Hi everybody. In this episode we're going to talk about how we went about planning for this trip. So things like choosing the route, deciding on which bikes we're going to take, what gear we would bring along, how much the whole trip was going to cost, and a whole load of other things. So really hope this episode is of use to those who are thinking about doing something similar. So let's dive in. So it was around this very table about 12 months ago that the four of us sat and decided that we wanted to go on this wonderful adventure. The research that we put into coming up with a plan has taken a considerable amount of time by all of us, but we pretty much started immediately once we decided that we wanted to do it. We got on the internet, we looked to see whether anybody else had been on the journey. There were a few people out there that had completed it, but not too many recently. So we were pretty much on the net, we were poring over maps. We were chatting, coming up with questions that we all had, and in the end we came up with a list of sort of high-level headings that we wanted to try and fill in to come up to a conclusion. Was the trip possible, and indeed how would we actually go about it? So we got that list of questions and put them into a spreadsheet, and we all went off and started doing our research, and we'll go through that list now. So first on our list was the route. What route are we going to take? And this was probably the most important bit of research we'll actually do, because it does determine A, whether it's indeed feasible, B, how long is it going to take, how much it's going to cost, what bikes we actually need based on the roads that we need to take. So we started going about researching, seeing whether other people had actually completed this journey. Recently there weren't that many, in fact none in the last couple of years due to COVID, and obviously some restrictions, and really we ended up with two major options. One was what we call the southern route, which was ride from Sydney to Darwin, ship the bikes from Darwin to Dili, up through Indonesia, go through Myanmar, India, Pakistan, Iran, and then into Europe. So that was the southern route. And then the northern route was same, Darwin, Dili, East Timor, Indonesia, and then into Laos and China and through the stands. And both had their issues. China looked great, but it was still closed from COVID. Myanmar looked like a really good option. We like the idea of going through Myanmar and India and Bangladesh, but turned out that Myanmar has got a civil war that started in 2021, and the only way to get around that into India is to either go through China or to fly your bikes. And we found one group of people that had shipped or flown their bikes from Bangkok to Nepal. We didn't really want to do that. We wanted to ride as much as possible. So again, it was back on the net doing lots of research, who's been there, get onto the Overlander forums, ask questions. There's lots of time speaking to people, messaging people, had they done it, looking at, there are some companies out there that offer motorcycle tours pretty much back from the other way, from London to Beijing, but they go through the routes, and we couldn't find anybody that had got through the Myanmar restrictions. So we ended up with having to make a choice. China looked like the only way that we could go through, but again that was still closed, and we also found out that to ride through China you need a full-time guide. So we had to research guides. How do you find a guide, how do you go about that? Again, it was on the net that we found some of the forums recommended them. We're out there contacting these companies to see whether it's indeed possible and how much it would actually cost. It's a fairly long distance. I think it's 5,000 or 6,000 kilometers. So to take a guide for that length of time was going to be expensive. So we looked at how do we share the expenses out there. Again, there are forums out there that you can share those expenses with. And really, once we got a rough route, we plotted it on Google Maps to come up with a distance and highlight what countries we'd actually need to go through. That would enable us to then determine what visas and whether it was indeed possible to go through those countries that we would want to be riding through. We also had to contact shipping companies to see whether it is indeed possible to ship the bikes out of Australia. we found out that the once frequent route out of Darwin to Dili was not quite so frequent. It used to be a weekly service direct to Dili. Now it's a monthly service, and it goes via Singapore, which is quite a detour, and looks like it takes around 8 to 12 weeks, sort of door to door, once everything's cleared and everything. So that's a long time to be waiting around, waiting for your bike. So we had to look at other options, and so we ended up doing, contacting lots of shipping companies. There are, as you can imagine, not many people that look at shipping bikes, motorcycles around the world. There are a few that operate, and we just contacted lots of those, and actually ended up coming up with a solution to air freight the bikes out of Perth to Bali. That seemed to be the best option for us. But it's getting on. There's lots of communications going backwards, shipping companies, forums. That's just what you've got to do to come up with a route. As I said, the route is primary to coming up with lots of other questions, and the next one really is that determines whether it's possible is visas and permits. So let's dive into that. So once we'd worked out our preferred route, we started to go through each of the countries and work out what the visa requirements are. So how do we get in? Can we actually get a visa? What's the process to apply? How much does it cost? How long does it take? And how do you go about doing it? That threw up a couple of anomalies. The major one being Tajikistan. We were hoping to go through Tajikistan, but the visa application process and granting is a bit uncertain. So people had reported that although you can get them, it's a little uncertain. If you've got a group of 4, 2 of you may get a visa, but another 2 might not get it. So we had to work around that. In addition to that, the requirements also state that you have to have a guide the full time you're there. We didn't really want to do that. It added extra cost and uncertainty to the trip and reduced flexibility. You had to go to certain places. It was a very fixed itinerary that you had to stick to. So we had to rework the route and come up with a different way. The next thing is looking at the bikes. How do you actually get a bike into the country? So there is a carnet system, which is like a bike passport that enables you to bring in a bike into a country without having to pay duty and GST on the bike on entry. Not all countries are signatories to that, so Thailand and China don't sign up to that, so there are different rules as to bringing a bike in. You need special permits to bring them in. Again, it's lots of research on different sites, people who have actually gone through it. And what we really found out is that the rules change quite frequently. So a rule may be brought in, but a month later is changed. So there is a lot of uncertainty around that. The next thing to consider is our licenses. Are our bike licenses, driving licenses, valid? We've applied for international driving permits, of which there are 2 types. We've applied for those, but some countries, again China, doesn't sign up to that system. So you actually have to apply for a Chinese driver's license before entering. Not only that, your bike also has to be registered in China. So again, looking at lots of research going into that. How do you actually go and do that? What's the process? What are the limitations on that? And just gathering all of that information and document it in the spreadsheet for future reference. The next thing was insurance, bike insurance. So obviously we have insurance on the bikes in our countries, Lobo in the UK and myself in Australia. But as soon as we leave, that insurance is invalid. Ours are both comprehensive, but we're unlikely to get comprehensive insurance for the bikes as we travel across. But we do need third-party insurance in every country that we travel through. And again, that's not covered by our existing policy. So how do we go about that? Most countries do offer third-party insurance on entry. So there's a whole process as to how to go about applying for that. How much does it cost? How long does it take to do? And is it worth the paper it's written on, and some countries yes, some countries no. So every country we had to go through and document that. In addition, there can be special requirements for every country we go through. Some have restricted areas. So again, parts of China you can't drive, so that restricts the route in which you can actually go through. Tajikistan, you need special permits to go through some of the areas there. So how do we apply for that? Where do we apply for that? We've got to make sure we do it before we actually get to those countries, so we're not waiting around for long periods of time. So all that was documented, put into the spreadsheet. We've got a table there to review. It is dynamic, and we have to review it as we go along the trip just to make sure it's still current and valid. But it gives us a working model that we feel reasonably confident on, that we can actually go along the route. Right from the start of planning this trip, the four of us discussed some key principles that we all thought were important to us as to how we go about this adventure. So we'd all decided that we didn't want it to make it a race. We didn't want to dash from one place to the next without actually getting to see anywhere. So we said that we'd try and ride 4 to 5 hours a day and try and get to our destination by around midday, which would give us time to have a look around, enjoy where we're going, but also make it more comfortable for us. And that we wanted to try and stop regularly, so make a day, get up and then ride for an hour, 2 hours, stop for a good break and then continue on. So that was one thing. The next thing was, we wanted time off to make time to go and see things. That we're going to go through some wonderful countries and get the opportunity to see some amazing things, so we wanted to plan to be able to take time off and see them. We also discussed the type of accommodation that we wanted to stay in. We'd all decided that it would be great to camp where possible. So through Australia we're hoping to do quite a bit of camping. We won't be camping much in Southeast Asia and China, but do hope to start camping in the stands and through the rest of Europe. There are going to be some amazing sights, and we're looking forward to that. We're not planning to stay in any fancy hotels. We're going to be staying in budget accommodation, Airbnbs, homestays, wherever we can, and it'll be great to meet some people that very kindly put us up in their homes. We also discussed, what if things go wrong? What if one of us gets ill? What if one of us has got to go home to see an elderly parent, so that we're prepared for that. We've got a contingency plan in place if that does happen, either to wait on the trip for them, or whether to terminate it. Hopefully that's not going to happen, but it was worthwhile discussing those things up front, so we all know where we stand. So there are lots of other things we discussed in terms of some of the key principles, but those are the main ones that will kind of help us understand how we want to go about this trip. Next up is deciding on which motorbikes we were going to go on. As you can imagine, Lawrence and I discussed this at quite an early stage. There were some key considerations that we had to think about. First of all is we are riding 2 up, so not only does that mean 2 people, it means twice the amount of luggage that we've got to take. So payload was a major consideration. Next thing was comfort. Quite often a motorcycle will have a fantastic rider seat, but the pillion passenger seat is pretty appalling, and we do want our lovely wives to enjoy this trip as much as we do. So looking at the comfort of a bike is also very important. Third thing is road types. We discussed early on that what kind of roads are we going to go on. As much as we'd like to do a lot of dirt riding with pillion and all the luggage weight, we decided that we'd probably stick primarily to tarmac. Doesn't mean to say we won't be riding off-road. There are sections that will be pretty gnarly, as they say. Parts of the Pamir Highway going over some of the passes in Tibet are rough, potholy, but we're not going to go full off-road. So obviously the bikes had to be able to handle that, but also it gave us a bit more leeway. We didn't need a full off-road bike, given that we're not going to be doing too much off-road. Next one is considering, small versus large. A lot of merits about taking a small bike, something like a DR 650, single cylinder. They're obviously lighter, more manoeuvrable, less to go wrong with them. They're quite reliable, but we pretty much discounted them immediately, just because the payload and the comfort for the passenger. It wouldn't tick those boxes. Great if you're travelling on your own. I would definitely do it if I was doing it again. I would go on something smaller. But given that we're riding two up with twice the luggage, we decided that we couldn't go on something small like that. Reliability is a big consideration. Covering about 35,000 kilometres, we want the bikes to be as reliable as possible, so it doesn't hold us up in many of the places. So researching which bikes are the most reliable, which issues that they have, trying to overcome that is a key consideration. If you look at some of our other videos, we go through in detail as to how we've mitigated that reliability issue. We also looked at where Lawrence is best getting his bike. Do we ship his over? Do we buy one in Oz? I think the decision was that he would bring a bike over from the UK, just because although you'd save on freight costs of not shipping a bike over, if you bring a bike to the UK you have to pay duty and VAT on it when you bring it in, and VAT is 20% in the UK, so it's quite an expense bringing it back. So it's actually cheaper to ship a bike out and ride it back, rather than buy something in Australia and ride it across. Both of us had BMW GS Adventures before we started this trip, and we've done quite a few miles on them. Lawrence has travelled extensively through Europe on his. I've taken mine up to the northern tip of Australia with a friend, which is like riding from London to China. So we're both familiar with those bikes, and do understand them a little bit better. So the choice was that we would actually stick with the BMW GS Adventures. We know them; they're very capable bikes. They're very comfortable for passengers. They're not without their issues, but what bike is. We just got to make sure that we understand them and try and mitigate some of those risks. As I said, we've got a couple of videos each on our bike preparations, but that's how we arrived at our bikes. Next up is the budget. So we decided it'd be a good idea to create a budget so we can work out roughly how much this trip is going to cost us before we start off. And so we kind of went through and worked out what are the main sort of cost items that we're going to incur, and using the spreadsheet that we created for the route, that gave us how many days we're going to be away, but it also gave us distance. So we were able to calculate the mileage, and based on some information we'd researched on fuel prices, gave us the cost of fuel. It also gave us the number of days that we'd be away, so we can calculate the accommodation costs. And we did that country by country. Australia's accommodation is far more expensive than some of the Southeast Asian countries or the European countries. So we looked at it country by country, working out what the fuel costs were going to be, what the accommodation costs were going to be, country by country. We also plugged in the costs of shipping the bikes out of Australia, and ferries through in Indonesia, and other costs associated with shipping the bikes. I've got to ship my bike back at the end of it. Lawrence has got to ship his bike out at the beginning of the trip. We also inputted the cost of any guides. We've got to pay for a guide in China. We've also got to purchase obviously visas and permits, international driver's licenses, carnets. All those got plugged in. The cost of the bike preparation, making sure the bike's all ready, it's serviced, it's got any additional components we wanted to put on it, and obviously our gear costs. We also inputted the servicing of the bikes as we travel across, and any tyres that we were going to have to purchase along the way. Insurance is another big one. We're going to buy travel insurance for the trip, plus third-party roadside road insurance that we all plugged in. So we ended up with a budget that gave us an idea of the cost. What we did also do is to take off our usual expenses. When you're at home, you do obviously use fuel, you do buy food, you do go out. So we kind of deducted that to see what the actual net cost of this trip was going to be. So we've got a template there that to work on. No doubt we'll be giving an update as we go, but we've got a good idea of what it's going to cost us as we travel across. So next up is our medical considerations. So first of all, again from the route, we looked at all the countries we're visiting, and then we went to see our doctor to find out what are the vaccinations we all need. They came up with a list, and then we started to get all our vaccinations, including Hep A, Hep B, rabies, typhoid, Japanese encephalitis, a whole list of vaccinations that we had to get done. We also looked into the common ailments that we might incur as we go on our travels. So COVID could be a possibility. We're obviously going to be meeting lots of people. What happens when we get COVID? How can we mitigate some of the effects of that? Dehydration is going to be a big one when we travel through Australia. So we've got to make sure we stay dehydrated, that we've got rehydration tablets or powder. We're going to get heat rash probably, so how do we mitigate that? Gastro is a big possibility through Asia, and mosquito-borne diseases. We might get dengue fever, possibility of malaria. How do we treat all of those to make sure that we're all familiar with those? In addition to that, when we go through China and Tibet, we'll be going through some fairly high altitudes, 5,000 meters. So there's a good chance we're going to suffer from altitude sickness. So we've got some altitude sickness tablets. We've got to make sure that we prepare ourselves for that as best we can. Try and get fit before we go, and as we start to climb, just be aware of those situations, so that we're aware if it's actually happening. We've signed up to do a first aid for motorcyclists training course in Adelaide, which is a first responder first aid course, so we can treat each other in the event of an accident. Hopefully that won't happen, but we want to be prepared. We've also put together a medical kit with the help of several people. Dave from Rams Adventures, one of Lobbo and Linda's friends, who's a paramedic, has given us advice and a kit, and the first aid for motorcyclists course person is going to be reviewing that and helping us with that when we do that. And obviously we've got to familiarise ourselves with how to actually use that. That kit is the kit that we're taking is going to be available on our website if anybody's interested. And then we'll also be taking out travel insurance. Now, travel insurance is a bit of a tricky one because obviously everybody wants to be covered, but you've got to make sure that you do your research. Look at all the reviews, review the terms and conditions, actually speak to the companies involved to make sure it does actually provide you with a cover. I'm always a bit sceptical. I always see the bad reviews, but I know Lawrence and Linda use a very good company that they're familiar with. They actually know them very well. That's a really good scenario because you want to know that you've actually got cover, and most of that cover is going to be, worst case scenario. Obviously you want to get treated immediately at the best place possible to cover those eventualities, but you also want cover to get repatriated if necessary. So we will be taking out cover. We've got one company that we're looking into. As I said, Lawrence and Linda have already sorted theirs out, so that's what we're looking into. Next up is communications. So here we're going to talk about how we plan to stay in touch and the importance of that. Obviously, in today's world, most places you can get internet or a cell phone service, which is remarkable, really. Particularly in some of the places that we're going. Obviously, there are places without it, but there are a few things we've done to try and research this and look into how we make sure we've got the best coverage as possible, because it's really important for a number of reasons. we're going to be using the internet to work out where to go, where to stay. Going to be using it for translation services and emergency calls, and to upload some of the video and the content that we're going to be making. So both our mobile phone carriers offer roaming services. I think the one from Australia is $5 a month. I think the UK one is £2 a month. That gives you certainly the Australian one's 5 gig a day for $5. It's pretty good value. If one of us gets that, we can always use our phone as a hotspot to others. Most of the new phones now have eSIM, so you can have a dual SIM on your phone, so you can keep your existing number with your roaming provider, and then you can also get a local eSIM for data. So that's going to be very useful. Again, you can use that as a hotspot for others. Lawrence and Linda have purchased a Garmin InReach that's going to be a satellite emergency messaging system, plus also it's a tracker. Uses the Iridium satellite network. That works pretty much anywhere. I think it's banned in China, but in China we should have cell phone services pretty much everywhere. Then the next thing is obviously looking at all the apps that we need. Apps, as I said, for navigation, that's a big one. So we've got obviously Google Maps. You can download maps. So if you're looking at a particular area, download the maps for offline use. There are a number of other apps like Maps.me, OSM, and Maps. A whole series of other navigational applications that can be downloaded for offline. So it still allows you to track, but you don't necessarily need a mobile phone signal to work out where you are and give you directions. They're very useful. China is a bit complicated. We're still trying to find out the rules for that. I know things like Google's banned. You've got to get a lot of Chinese-based apps there. So we've been given some advice as to which Chinese apps that we have to download that will give us navigation and communications instructions. So that's going to be good. Google Maps is just a fantastic application. It enables you to not only work out where you're going, but with this satellite view you get to look at the terrain. It's got all sorts of other information on there as to where to stay. You can zoom in and use Street View to look at the actual state of the roads, depending on obviously how recent they are updated, but it'll give you an indication as to what a road does actually look like and what a particular place does actually look like. So if you wanted to book some accommodation and you don't know, you're not sure whether it's what sort of area it's in, you can use Street View to go and check it out. Really quite useful. Other applications for booking accommodation, Booking.com, obviously Airbnb, iOverlander is a very popular one as well with travellers. So you just got to download all those apps, keep them updated. No doubt there's going to be a whole bunch of other ones that we've missed, but that should enable us to stay in touch most of the way, and make life a little easier in terms of booking accommodation, making sure we're going where we're supposed to be going. So hopefully that'll work. In addition to that, we've purchased an intercom system, so we can all talk between us, which would be great if we're going through cities and need to give instructions, chatting about what to do, and just making the journey a little bit more pleasant. I won't be singing, hopefully, for everybody else. I think that's about it. No. So all four of us decided that it would be a good idea to document our trip. Primary reason being that it's going to be something wonderful to look at later in life, and remember some of the great times we had, hopefully have, on the journey. But it is a quite a big commitment to do. If you're going to do it properly, it's not just about taking some extra snaps. We want to try and make some nice videos and take some good photographs. So we need to learn an awful lot, and as you probably noticed from some of the earlier videos, it is a fairly steep learning curve. So really what we've done is we've looked at getting ourselves social media accounts. A lot of us never even had them before. Lawrence never had a Facebook account, and now he's a super Facebooker. I've built a website for ourselves. I've set up a YouTube channel which we've been putting our videos up to. Set up a TikTok account, Instagram account, a whole load of things. But we've also had to learn how to edit videos, which is quite an interesting task to do. We decided that we wanted to do it ourselves because we could get somebody else to do it, but the time taken to do that would be quite extensive, and it's quite an onerous task for somebody to actually do. We wanted to try and do it as quickly as possible. Plus also trying to upload gigabytes of video footage over the internet in some remote places might be a bit of a challenge, and communicating the edits. So we decided to do it ourselves. We'll see whether it works out and see whether it's any good. So bear with us. Hopefully everything will improve. What we're also doing is that we've decided that we're going to support a couple of good causes, and we've got another video there about those causes, and we've decided to donate any funds that we do get back from our YouTube channel to those good causes. Hopefully we'll get enough viewers, subscribers and likers to enable us to generate some funds and contributions for those causes. But also we hope that the primary reason is to just create some awareness of what those organisations are doing, how they're trying to benefit others' lives. So hopefully there'll be some good that will come out of those videos as well. So as we go through, we'll hopefully be improving both our video skills, our sound recording skills. You will have seen from before that a few of the quality of the sound in the early videos was appalling, but I think it's improving with a bit of advice from some of our YouTube listeners who have provided comments and suggestions. Thanks very much indeed. Next up is gear and equipment. Won't go into too much detail in this section, just because we've done a few videos on our gear that are already up on YouTube, but it's clearly a very large component of our preparations, working out what we can take, what we can't take, what we should take, what we shouldn't take. There's been lots of comment, feedback, suggestions on this subject, and it's all been incredibly useful. But one thing we have learned is that riding two up with a passenger is makes it the challenge of deciding what to take that much harder. We've got two people on one bike, so that's effectively half the weight and half the luggage space, and twice the amount that you've got to take. So it does create quite a challenge to try and fit everything in and stay under the payload of the bike. So we've come up with our lists. We're all prepared. We've bought everything. It's already on the bikes. Jude and I did a test run of several thousand miles to make sure we got everything we need in terms of camping equipment and other stuff. We think we got it right, but we won't know until we've done it. The process was, we were going out to research online. There's lots of fantastic forums out there, overlander forums, motorcycle forums that come back with great suggestions. Lob's been fantastic in going out to Facebook groups, and they've been coming out with some great suggestions as to what to do. Lots of debate again, from the wonderful to the sublime. Should we take Crocs or thongs? Just and some useful things as to what tools to take. There's things that we didn't even think about, and people have made some wonderful suggestions. Anyway, we've got a list. Our list is actually up on our website. If you want to check it out as to everything we're taking, including the toolkit and the medical kit and everything. We won't really know, as I said, if it's right until we actually get going. Challenges are that we're riding through some very different temperature zones. It's going to be baking hot as we go through Australia, up to 40 degrees. So and then as we go through Tibet, it's going to be freezing cold. So we've got to try and cover everything as we go. So as I said, only time will tell. But if you want to find out more information on this, check out our earlier videos and our website. Thanks. So in summary, it's almost 12 months since the four of us sat round this very table and decided that we wanted to do this wonderful adventure. It's gone round pretty quickly, but the whole process of looking into the research and trying to work out whether we can do it and how we do it has been very much a collaborative process. We've each got our own strengths, and we've been putting in everything equally, and it's been a really quite wonderful experience. Planning a trip can be as much fun as doing it in many aspects. We put many hundreds of hours into researching, the route, the costs, the shipping side of it, chasing people up endlessly for information, hours and hours and hours of research to look into gear, what do we need to the bikes. There's just been so much that's required, but it has been fun. Well, I've enjoyed it anyway so far. Only time will tell whether whether it actually works out. No doubt things will change and they won't go quite as planned, but I suppose that's part of the adventure, and we've just got to be prepared for that to happen. Lawrence and Linda, as you know, live in Wales, and we live in Sydney, Australia. So just trying to communicate between us has been a challenge, but we've done it. We've been WhatsApping each other, having regular meet-up calls. We've been sharing documents and notes on a daily basis, and when some decisions need made, we all do it together. So it has actually worked out really quite well. I would say that keeping track of all the information has been probably one of the best things. Again, we've got so much information. Trying to remember where it all came from has been a challenge. So having that spreadsheet for me at least has been great. I'd never be able to remember the route or the distances, or keep a track of which research sites I'd been to, or the costs and the quotes. So documenting everything and keeping on top of that is critical to make sure it all actually works. So that's great. We're ready to go. I think it's like 3 weeks before we actually depart on our first leg across Australia, and we'll be reporting back as to how these plans actually work out. So hopefully you'll follow us, and hopefully you'll have a look at some of the good causes we're supporting. Black Dog Ride in Australia and Mental Health Motorbike in the UK. Check them out. The links are on our website. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us, share it, check out our TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all of that malarkey. That would be great. We do appreciate your support, and every view you look at does go to help a good cause. So thanks very much, and do messages if you've got any questions. We'd love to reply. Many thanks.